But it wasn't until, I was there for a while and I got to witness some things that I realized it was beyond this is how we practice our faith. It was, and this isn't just exclusive to them, like a lot of churches that I've seen say, we are the one true church. Catholic Church says that, Orthodox Church says that. Different, like what I thought of as just denominations, people practicing their faith differently, think that they are the church. They are the only ones getting it right, and they are the only ones who are set for salvation at the end of the day. And that's when I became concerned. Because this is just, it was just confusing to me because
I know you won't leave me lonely, never.
What's going on, my There's Hope family? Welcome back to the channel. Got another hopeful conversation. Really excited about this episode. Have a wonderful guest here with me today. Gonna get into that. But before we do, if this is your first time to the channel, glad that you can tap in with us. We are all things There's Hope. We believe that no matter our past and no matter what we're facing currently, there's always hope in Jesus. Hope for us spiritually, emotionally, physically, hope for reconciliation, just hope in all areas of life. That's what this channel is all about. If that speaks to you, make sure you subscribe. In this particular hopeful conversation, we're going to be talking about the ebbs and flows of a faith walk that started in childhood, going into the teenage years, in college, and into womanhood. And our guest is just going to share her story, and I'm really excited about hearing it. I've known a little bit of it, but I'm excited about, getting into the meat and potatoes and getting into the details of her story. So without further ado, let's clap it up, which we can't see y'all clapping, but we're gonna, what is this? Let's give it up for Miss K, y'all, our guest today.
hands.
Glad you can tap in with us today, Miss K. I don't call her Miss K, I call her K. Excited to hear about your story. So tell the people a little bit about you. Where you from?
Yeah.
What you like to do? Where'd you go to college? Et cetera, et cetera.
So my name's Kay. From Florida. Moved to Dallas about 4 years ago. Coming up on 4 years this summer, end of this summer. What do I like to do? I don't do too much. I'm pretty much a homebody. I love to read. I do like to be outdoors a bit. I love to go on walks. I play tennis once a week with my lovely sister, Angie. I really honestly don't do too much. What else did I say that I do? I go to the gym. That's becoming a part of my routine. Roller skating. I love to rollerblade. Go really fast downhill. Super fun. I think that's about it. I went to school in Florida, so I just moved to Dallas 4 years ago. Went to college did undergrad at University of South Florida, Go Bulls in Tampa, and then I got my master's at FAU in Boca.
Okay, what's their mascot, FAU? Florida, no, it's the Owls. That's right. That's right. Okay. FAU. I think. Oh no, I was gonna say that's where Jan goes. She got a D1 scholarship, but it might be FIU that she goes to. I can't remember. But nonetheless, where are you from? Did you tell the people where you're from?
From Florida. Well, grew up in Florida, but born in New York. Moved to Florida when I was a kid. So I'm a Floridian.
New York and Owls. What part of New York?
Queens.
Queens. All my queens do this. All my Queens people. All right, let's get into a little bit. So, tell us a little bit about, your childhood and how you grew up in the faith, or how was your faith in terms of your childhood?
Yeah, so that's something that was instilled in me from a very early age from both sides of my family. Was raised primarily by my mother, and she, made sure that we were in church every Sunday. That wasn't up for discussion. So, we'd go to church every Sunday. Each of my siblings and I, we each had our own Bible. We were encouraged to read our Bible every day, say our prayers every day. Any issue that we have, we take it up to God. With that, she also instilled certain values in us. We don't lie, cheat, or steal. We are kind to people. We're respectful of, just people. And we just conduct ourselves a certain way. There's certain expectations of us. On my dad's side, so my dad lived in another state, but I would visit him several times a year. My dad also instilled, the same values in us, but he wasn't a believer. However, when I was with him, I would spend time with my aunt and my grandmother, who were devout Christians. My aunt would bring us to church with her every Sunday. We would do different activities, lots of faith-based activities. So that's something that was always present in my life that I didn't really have to think too much about.
Okay. So faith was instilled, Sunday school, you were going to church with your mom when you were with your mom, and then even on your dad's side, you would still be going to church as well, but more so with
my aunt.
Your aunt. Okay, cool. So we go from childhood to, let's say, maybe teenage, 15, 16 years old. Did you really understand what it meant to believe in the gospel at 15, 16? Were you able to wrap your mind around it at all?
Yeah, I understood the basics of, what we believed, that we believe in Jesus Christ, that, he came, died for our sins. Ultimately, like that was really like the gist of my understanding is we're Christians. We live our lives a certain way. We do certain things. We abstain from certain things. And we just like conduct ourselves in a certain way. And this is all based on the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Okay. So you mentioned you graduated from USF with your bachelor's and also got your master's at FAU. So obviously you went to college. So at 15, 16, you're transitioning into adulthood. At 18, getting ready to go to college. Kind of speak to how you took your faith with you from high school into adulthood for college, like.
So as a teenager was really when I gained a sense of ownership over my faith. As a kid, I was told we're a Christian. This is what we do. We go to church on Sunday. We read our Bibles. We don't do these things. We behave ourselves. If you stray away from that, you're going to get in trouble. God is watching. I'm watching. I know what you do. It was really just like, I'm a Christian because my mom told me so. My family told me so. And I believe, like, in a sense, as much as I guess a child could grasp that, but coming into my teenage years, yes, I was still expected, to go to church every Sunday, but it was kind of like, there wasn't a lot of like structure or like rigidness to it outside of like, you're expected to behave a certain way. I really got to kind of start to think for myself in terms of like, yeah, I have to go to church, I have to show up, but I don't really want to be here. Or, I'm expected to believe in this thing, but I don't really care to read my Bible all the time. So it started to look a little bit more like that in my teenage years. So going into college is when I was really able to, I didn't have my mom forcing me to go to church every Sunday. I did go there. I still did identify as a Christian. I remember when I first got to school, my mom said, make sure you find a church. They have like church groups. That's one of the first things she asked about on the tour. And so I did go into like one of those groups. But I didn't really feel it. Like, I just something about it. Just like, I don't really care to be here with these people. And I really got to choose, like, I don't have to go to church every Sunday. I still, like I said, identified as a Christian. I would occasionally read my Bible, but for the most part, it was just kind of like out of sight, out of mind. Especially, going to college and, partying, having a good time. I wasn't like a super wild person, but to me, I'm very much so like, it's either you're in or you're out. It's either I'm living my life according to the guidelines that were set forth for me, or I'm now a hypocrite and I'm not. Like, I'm not in. I can't claim to be a Christian and my life looks like this. Again, wasn't super wild. I wasn't doing anything crazy, but to me, either you're in or you're out. And so when I was out, I was, just like out of sight, out of mind. If I'm not claiming Christianity, like nothing that I do like matters. God can't see what I'm doing. Nothing matters. So that's kind of how I started to live. I'm a Christian fundamentally at my core, but not like practicing.
Gotcha. Okay. So you believe that Jesus died for your sins and all the work that he did, right? Your faith was in that, but you weren't practicing it. So you weren't like praying and spending time with God in a way to help you grow and build day by day upon your faith. Okay. All right. So that's your childhood, your teenage years going into college. Well, in college, actually. So you decide to push the faith to the side since you're not doing it 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me when you began to find yourself in the space where you're like, I don't even know if I believe this or if I want to believe this. What would have caused that?
So that's honestly something that I struggled with throughout my entire faith journey. As a child, I had questions, like things didn't fully make sense to me, but I knew like I didn't want to get into trouble, right? So my mom said, this is what we believe, this is how we behave. Again, I wasn't like a bad kid, but you know, kids can be mischievous, kids can do things. So I did always have questions as a kid, you know, like, who is God? Where did God come from? Is God always like really watching us? Does God really care what we do? Like I had those questions as a kid. But it wasn't anything to shake my faith because my faith was grounded in whatever my mom said it was. Coming into my teenage years now, like I said, I was able to gain more ownership and like independence over like how I practice my faith and what it really meant to me. Because at that point, like ultimately at the end of the day, right, I'm responsible for it. So my mom, my aunts, whoever can tell me that I'm Christian all they want to until they're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, I have to answer for myself and my beliefs. If I'm just going along to get along, that's not gonna work. So as a teenager was really when I started to kind of sort of question things a little bit. And I say my faith has always been hot and cold and up and down because there were times where I just, you know, really wanted to do the right thing. I really wanted to get it right. Super excited, reading my Bible, going to church every week. Saying I'm going to stay awake in church. I'm going to pay attention. I'm in it. And then there were times where I'm like, it's boring. I don't know that it really matters. I'm not that bad anyways. Like it's not a big deal. Like it's too much. I'm doing too much. So it would be like just constant cycles of that. Sometimes I'm like super excited. Sometimes I'm like, I don't really care for it. So as a teenager, we had moved to a new town, and you know we had always grown up in non-denominational churches, so it was very standard, very chill, not too much excitement. We go in, we do our praise and worship, we listen to the scripture, go to Sunday school, and go home, and that was it. It wasn't it wasn't a very exciting environment, but we loved it. It was very chill. Yes. Yeah. So when we moved to a new town now, we're trying to find a new church. So that's when we got a little bit more exposure to like the different types of churches out there. And I had always been exposed to like different religions. I always knew like people had different beliefs. I always knew there were different forms of Christianity, like different ways that people practice their faith. But I had never spent too much time around like different churches. I had gone to Catholic Mass. I had gone to, different churches here and there. I had friends of from different denominations. So I always knew that was a thing. But growing up, we were taught that these different Christian practices, we all believe the same thing. It's just it just looks differently for every church. Cool, no problem. So we moved to a new town. We're trying to find a new home church. And so we're visiting different churches and we're seeing, different things that are, some things like shocking, scary, like a lot going on. One church, they held us hostage there for like 7 hours. I don't know what was going on. They just like wouldn't let us out. Service just would never end. Another church, they are basically sticking people up for their money. Didn't know what was going on. Another one, there's a lot of like hollering and screaming and jumping around. And like that's not something we were used to. So we were kind of like scared, like what's happening?
That charismatic.
Yeah. So that was when I really got to see things. And again, to me, it's like, okay, well, this is a lot, but still, these are Christians. We all believe the same thing. It just looks differently for everyone. It wasn't until I actually like started spending time, like actually attending a church that was different for mine. So in high school, I had a friend who was SDA, Seventh-day Adventist. And this is no like shade or knock to like people from that denomination, but she invited me to go to church with her. And I went to church and I loved it. It was a small, close-knit church. And I had never been part of a church community. We would, go to church, go home. There was maybe a short stint where I was in the choir, but outside of that, like I had never been part of a church family. And I loved like just seeing how everyone operated in that church. It was like a family. The kids who went there who were my age were pretty much born into that church. And that's how it was like at first. I was just like, wow, this is great. Started learning about like their beliefs and like how they practice their faith. And again, no problem. I was told, different people do different things differently. But it wasn't until, I was there for a while and I got to witness some things that I realized it was beyond this is how we practice our faith. It was, and this isn't just exclusive to them. Like a lot of churches that I've seen say, we are the one true church. Catholic Church says that. Orthodox Church says that. Different, like what I thought of as just denominations, people practicing their faith differently, think that they are the church. They are the only ones getting it right, and they are the only ones who are set for salvation at the end of the day. And that's when I became concerned, because it was just confusing to me, because we all have the same book, the same words, the same meaning. How are we all getting it like so different? I can't say wrong because I don't know. Everyone thinks that they're right. How is everyone coming to all of these different conclusions? Either God was not clear and set us up for this confusion, or people are just making it up as they go along. And neither of those things like sat well with me. So that's when I first, long story short, that's when I really first started to kind of doubt. Like I said, I'd been in and out, hot and cold, but that's when I really started to be concerned about like, what is it that I'm actually believing in? Like, how do I know that I'm getting it right? And just started to come up with these questions of like, is any of this even real? If everyone's just so all over the place. And that is something that I kind of like would present itself. Like I would stuff it down and say, well, no, that's just what they're saying. Like the Bible says this, you're good. But it's something that was kind of like always the undercurrent of like, what am I even believing in? What's even going on here?
Okay. Now, I do want to speak to what you said a little bit in terms of like you have the Bible, but so many people are seeing it differently. When I think about life as a whole, I don't see that being any different from when we go to a class and maybe it's 15. I mean, in high school, you usually had about 20 to 25 people in your class, unless you went to a private school. And even in college, you had, maybe you had some small, maybe 5 to 15, 5 to 20, depending on if it was prerequisite or if you were like in your major. The whole point is that you have the same teacher, you have the same book, you have the same study material, and it seemed like so many, like the spectrum by which people's understanding is happening, people's understanding seems to be so broad, and that can be a real issue, especially with something as sacred as our faith, to where we're both reading the same scripture. It's the same true God, the same Jesus, but we're on two different sides of the street yelling at each other, saying, no, you wrong, and you saying, no, you're wrong. That can really give room to the devil, to cause this unsettling frustration in us, that really kind of like puts us on an edge, right? So with that, this is where you are. You're kind of on an edge now, where you really weren't practicing it consistently in college anyways, but you were still like, I know this is what I identify as, I know this is what I believe. But now you get this confusion that now comes into your life, that enters the chat. Confusion has now entered the chat. And now tell us what comes along next that causes your faith to kind of take the next, take the next hit that it took.
So my faith had gone through cycles of just ups and downs. I'm hot and cold, I'm in, I'm out. But I was still Christian. And so that went on for many years of that, like, okay, now I really need to like buckle down. I really need to read my Bible. I really need to do this, and then fall off again. Into adulthood now, I started going to church again. I was in my 20s, and I had been in a relationship. It was a very long relationship, several years long. We were living together at the time. He didn't go to church. I don't know that he identified as anything, but he wasn't, I wouldn't say he was a believer. He had no interest in going to church, had no interest in really talking about like religious type stuff. So I would go to church, he wouldn't, and I started to be presented with a conflict of that same thing again. Like, I'm not doing it right. And I know that. And I'm kind of like ignoring that, like it's fine, I'm still a Christian, like it's okay if this part of my life isn't together. Like I didn't think too much of it at a point, and then at another point it was like I'm just being a hypocrite. Like this isn't working for me. And then also you know, having a partner who didn't go to church, it was very easy to like fall away from that. So for a while, like my brother, he lived in the same town. We would go to church together with my aunt on my mom's side. We would go to church every Sunday, and that was it. Then he moved away, and I would still go to church occasionally with my aunt, but it became easier for me to skip it. And especially like my partner doesn't go to church, doesn't have any interest in that. And so I just started getting in my head again of like, I'm not doing it right anyway. What's the point here? And not only that, I still had like the thoughts and concerns of like that human element, like just hypocrisy, just in the church, all of the confusion. And the church that I was going to at the time, and mind you, like I had already been having these issues, right? These things that I had been struggling with and just stuffing it down. So it's just like, I'm going to church because I truly believe this. I am a Christian. I'm trying. The church that I was going to at the time ended up having an embezzlement scandal where the leadership stole like a lot of money from the congregation. And that, I won't say like that was it. That was the final straw, but that was just what I needed to like, see, this is why you can't trust these churches. Like I wasn't going that much.
Was this
anyway.
your aunt's church?
Yes, it was my aunt's church. Yeah.
How did she respond to that?
She was concerned. She was upset. She still goes to that church, by the way. And I have gone to that church again since. She started looking for another church, but I don't remember like how they handled the blowback to where like kind of like switched things around in leadership, apologized, said like it's good, like we won't let that happen again. I don't remember fully how they handled it, but I know she was upset. Started talking about looking for another church. Ultimately, she stayed. She maybe stopped going there for a little bit. And me, I was in that cold phase where I wasn't going that much anyway. And then I took that as like, see, this is why you don't need to be going. Yeah. Okay. But that isn't what ultimately broke my faith. So the relationship that I was in ended, and it ended in a way that was just, it was just very heartbreaking and devastating for me, because it ended with betrayal, and it just kind of made me start questioning everything about life. I just felt like it honestly doesn't matter what you do in life. Like we're told to live our lives a certain way, like follow these principles and, do the right thing, and everything's going to be fine. And you can do all of that. And that's not to say that I was, a saint. I was the perfect, person, but I know that I was very good partner. I was, faithful. I was loving. I was kind. He was well taken care of. I'll say that. And so to me, I took that as like, oh wow, like it really doesn't matter. You can do exactly what your parents say. You can do exactly what God says, and not that I did do that, but like you could do that, and everything can still fall apart. Everything can still blow up in your face. So what's the point? Like what are we doing here? So that was really like at the end of that relationship, and how things came about. Did that push you over the edge? It did. Okay. It did. It just put me into a really, really dark place. And then I think the thing that really like broke, like just where I was like, absolutely not, I'm done, was the concept of forgiveness. That was my stopping point. Speak to that. So yeah. Speak to how you came to a point to where you're like, man, it doesn't matter if I believe or not, because it doesn't mean that my life is going to be well anyways. Like, it doesn't matter if I do these right principles. If I do these principles and practice them, not perfectly, but in a healthy way, it still doesn't guarantee that I'm going to be treated right, that I'm not going to experience this depth of betrayal that leaves me shattered. And then now it sounds like to some degree you were still kind of looking into your faith for a solution to help navigate it, and then you run up on forgiveness, in which you have to forgive, I'm assuming, your ex-boyfriend. Yeah. So wait, were you looking for something and you just ran up on forgiveness? Or honestly, I didn't even get to that point. Okay. Because I already knew, right? I didn't even get to the point of like, I'm in such a sense of despair and darkness and depression that's when most people of the faith would lean in to their faith, lean into God, and try to find some light in that darkness. I didn't even do that. I just said, I already know what I'm going to find. I already know how the church speaks, and it's immediately like forgiveness is the first thing that comes up, and I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear. That's the last thing that I want to hear right now.
So your pain was so deep, you couldn't imagine the idea of forgiving this person for the betrayal.
Yeah.
Okay. So by default of that, you were like, okay, I don't want anything to do with the faith.
Yeah. I mean, I know it sounds like so like, dang, like you just abandoned the whole faith over that thing. But to me, it just felt so much deeper than that. Like, and eventually I did start to look like, okay, well, I need to heal. Like, how do I heal from this? And I already knew, before I went to the Bible, before I went to God. And again, I didn't have any conversations with anyone about this. I just knew, I grew up Christian. I know that forgiveness is the essential, like the core of the faith. So I already knew that's what I was going to run into. And I wanted to run somewhere else. And I knew there was no way around that. So I kind of just said, well, that's a non-starter. That's not happening. That's not happening. And so I started looking for another way to heal without forgiveness. And I started to see it as like, it just felt kind of cruel in a sense. Like, God expects me to forgive this person. God is asking so much more of me that it's not possible. I just could not see how it was possible. I can understand, like, I did research on forgiveness and healing and all of that, and I understand why it's important. I understand how it works. Like they say, not forgiving someone is like you drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's like you're holding something in your anger, because for me, I was clinging tight to, like, that's not fair. Like, why should I forgive him? Like, he's not deserving of that. And I knew that as a Christian, like, there's no way around it. Like, I do have to do that. And so I wanted to run away from that. And it felt just like inhumane. Like, by telling me to forgive, you were basically kind of like stripping my humanity. Like, I'm not allowed to be angry. I'm not allowed to be hurt and have this resentment. Like, I'm just supposed to, I guess, be fake and be like, oh, I forgive him. Like, I don't. I don't, and I don't want to. And it just felt like, this is so cruel to look at me and all my pain and everything that I'm going through and kind of like ignore that. Say, yeah, I know you're mad, but like, be nice to him.
I think, well, for one, I think, let me say a couple of things. For one, I believe the fact that forgiveness entered the chat immediately was God's faithfulness in your life, striving to get you on a path of healing already. And you saying, no, I'm not going to do that, was like, no, I don't want any parts of that. You were pushing God out. But I do want to say this. I don't believe that God is asking us to not feel what we're feeling, if that makes sense. I don't believe he's saying you can't feel a sense of resentment for them. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's saying you do have to forgive them because I've forgiven you.
Yeah.
And because he knows that forgiveness heals, he was trying to help you to heal, but your interpretation of that was he don't deserve it. So, and I kind of want to say this. Let me just say this. It's almost like God gets the butt end of the stick most times when we are going through, because by default, God and his loving kindness towards us is there. But we're like, no, everything else that matters to me is going bad, and I don't have time for your forgiveness.
Yeah.
So, I feel, but back to what I was saying, I don't believe he wants us to act like the resentment isn't there. Because if we do, then we're not actually being honest.
Exactly.
So, I will say, the devil likes to play in that playground of our pain. Like, he likes to get in that playground of our pain, and he just like to mock us, like the same thing that he was essentially saying, like, but Job, if you allow me to bring this much tragedy and pain and grief and sorrow and sickness and misery into Job's life, I know he's going to curse you. You see what I'm saying? So you're in this position. Of course, we can't quantify your pain and compare it. I don't think that's ever really healthy, but you're in a place that's so dark that now the solution that God has for you isn't even palatable for you.
Yeah, I couldn't see, like, and I started to do research, like, what is forgiveness? Like, what does it mean? And I came across everything that said, well, it doesn't mean that that person's off the hook. It doesn't mean that you have to be smiling in their face. It doesn't mean that, like, y'all are cool and everything's fine and that what they did was okay. I knew all of that. I saw all of that, but I still could not fathom, like, then where is it coming from? Like, where am I supposed to pull this forgiveness from? Like, I just couldn't fathom. And to me, like, this is impossible. Maybe one day, but, like, what is being asked of me is impossible. There's no way. And that's so I got stuck on that.
Yeah, it's a great place to be in and impossible, because that's where God's strength comes and help us make it possible. Like, all right, so I guess direct question, have you forgiven him?
Yeah.
Okay, so this impossible act became possible because in some way along the journey, God empowered you to forgive him with time and all of that. Now I was going to say something, but I kind of lost my train of thought. But I do think that, this is what I was going to say. I believe pain allows us to see what God sees in us. So you didn't know that this level of wrestle with forgiveness even existed in you. Not that God caused your boyfriend to then do this betrayal that hurt you that deep, because God don't want his daughters of Zion being hurt like that. But what God is able to do is, with this pain that came from your ex-boyfriend, he's able to show you what's in your heart. Because God's plan, the reason why, it kind of ties into why there's hope, why we can place our hope in Jesus, and why with Jesus we have hope, is because even in this situation that's so dark, so broken, God is able to show us what's inside of us so that we can look more and more like Christ. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's like the opposite. It's like the way he does things is upside down. We would think that he'd be like, okay, during a good season of our life, he'd be like, hey, by the way, you got some you're going to struggle with the idea of unforgiveness. So let's work that out while things are good. It's like, nah, it's when suffering comes and we're at our wits' end, and it's like God is like putting a mirror in front of us and causing us to see all this other gunk in our lives that makes it challenging. That's kind of what I was hearing.
Yeah. So I didn't take that path. Like, God is showing me something. I took it as, like, God literally does not care.
Yeah.
Like, how can you expect me, like a mere human being, to just muster up this forgiveness in this state of just, like, darkness? And
you felt like God was unfair.
Yeah, I did.
Like, can you explain maybe some of the things that you thought of God in that dark place?
So I kind of just really took it to the extreme of, like, not only is it like nothing you do, like nothing that we do matters. I took it way to the extreme of, like, why are we even here? Why are we even here? Like, I think of, I just started to think along the lines of, like, you knew what we were, you knew what we would become, you knew all of the sick and depraved and just evil things that we would put ourselves and each other through, and you still, like, created us and just turned us loose on one another. Like, I just felt like, how is that loving? Like, what's the purpose of that? Like the Cardi B meme where she's like, what is the reason? Like,
when she's yelling. Yeah.
Like, that's how I felt. Like, and maybe it's extreme, like, oh my gosh, all that over a breakup, but it wasn't just that. It was like, how things played out, and then just thinking in the grand scheme of life.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
You started
here?
thinking about kids being trafficked,
Yeah,
women
like
being
everything,
raped, kids
like,
being molested, losing loved ones. You started,
everything,
you went down
like,
that hole.
all of these things, like, yeah, and my situation is nothing new, nothing like out of the ordinary, whatever, but it's like, this is just like a small piece of like who we are as people, and you knew what we would become. You knew what we were capable of, what we would do to each other, and you still like just said, all right, go ahead.
And when you're saying that, what comes to mind is Job, when Job was like, cursed is the day I was born.
Yes, but literally that.
His pain was so deep.
Literally that.
You know what I'm saying? Like his pain was so deep that, you know, him cursing the day he was born, you know, to me was just like essentially saying what you saying, like, why did I even exist? Why did you even bring me here? I don't know if Job said this, but I don't know, somewhere along the line, like, I think somewhere in the Bible it talks about someone who wished they were stillborn in a sense. Was that Job?
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
But I definitely felt like those things.
I don't mean to get all scriptural on you. No, I'm not going to look that up. But I have been in Lamentations this past week or the week before, I can't remember. But Jeremiah was lamenting all of the bad things that had been going on with Israel and even the things that were going on in his life. And I think sometimes when we don't have a grasp of what it means to believe in God and experience the turmoils of this world, we get into a season of lamenting or mourning, and we're not able to see God clearly because we did not know that with Jesus, with salvation, with assurance of faith, with his love and his kindness, still comes seasons of mourning and lamenting and pain and disappointment and struggle and hardship and frustration and insecurity. You know, even when we're controlling the controllables, you know, it's just like there's still so much pain even in that. And I think during hardships, God is able to teach us of what it really means to have faith. My dad said something that I was with him last weekend for Father's Day. He said, one day we can learn more about God in one day or 1 week of hardships, of suffering, than 100 years of bliss and blessings. And the reason why I think of that with you saying this is because ultimately, you know, it's a spoiler alert, but you're a believer. You know what I'm saying? You're practicing your faith. But there's things you got to know about God through this suffering that had this never came about, you wouldn't have learned. So transitioning from there, kind of talk to, like, we get that you thought God was unfair, that you're like, what was you questioning like the point of existence, even questioning if this was a real faith altogether. Now talk to us about, like, now that you're on the other side of that challenge, the other side of that deep pain, what did you learn about God?
I have definitely learned a lot about like God's grace and just patience. Because I had stepped away from the faith for several years, that I just and I still believed like there was a God, there was a creator. I just kind of questioned like the goodness of God. But I didn't believe, like I didn't identify as a Christian. Like I just wanted nothing to do with that. And I just think there's a lot of beauty in being able to just walk away and think, like being at a point where I thought the horrible things that I thought about like God and Christianity, and be able to, I guess, spend all of that time away from him, not too far away. I think he was always like lingering there in my life. But to be able to come back to it and just experience like what forgiveness really means, because I think it was probably recently that I can actually say that I have forgiven my ex. And just being able to feel like, oh, wow, this is what you were trying to get me to do from the beginning. And I tormented myself for years. Through all like whatever healing I did heal some, but it was always like incomplete. And I'm still like on a healing journey, but it was always like, I was always kind of in that state of darkness in a sense. And to be able to come back to the faith and just kind of understand like what he was trying to show me, what he was trying to tell me, the value and the beauty and the peace in forgiveness, I think is one of the big things that I learned, not only for like my situation, but also for myself, right? Because I'm not a saint. I've hurt people. I've done things that I should not have done. And I would punish myself for those things as well. But to know, why God calls us to forgive people, because he has, forgiven us, and just being able to really see the beauty and the sense of peace and love in that, I think is one of the biggest things.
So grace, patience, the sense of peace and beauty and forgiveness is what you're able to learn about God. I was thinking about what you were saying about, practicing these principles, yet, if things can blow up in our face, so why does it even matter? I was thinking about that, and it made me, because you begin to question your existence and all of that. If God, made you a millionaire, I think what happens is that we then don't tend to process the challenges that could come with that. And when, let's say God makes you a millionaire, and then you find out like one of your closest family members, I don't want to say a siblings because, but just a family member betrays you and is stealing money. Now, like, we don't tend to think like, well, why did you ever, well, I actually think people do say, well, why did you make me a millionaire if being a millionaire was going to bring this kind of pain? So I believe it's one of those spaces to where as we grow in our walk, we understand that God is always blessing us. But with his blessings, because of the world that we live in, there's always going to be attacks of Satan, people with demonic ideologies, people who are just sinfully, who's thirsty in terms of like sin. They're just thirsty for sin. They're just evildoers. They love Satan. They're going to be looking for opportunities to harm us, and Satan is always looking to play in that playground once that harm hits. Because think about it, he didn't say if you give Job double of what he has right now, he'll forsake you. He didn't say that. He said if you allow me to take stuff from him, if you allow me to bring pain into Job's life, that he'll forsake you. So when I'm listening to your story and the questions you have for God, I'm not trying to answer those for you. It's just making me think. Like sometimes we experience such goodness from God that when the brokenness of our world hits our life, we don't even know how to respond. But like, God, why am I even alive? When just before the breakup and during your time of your relationship, you were loving that guy. You were enjoying it. But then when the betrayal came, unfortunately, you were like, why am I here? Well, as you said, what is the reason? What is the reason? Okay. So how did you're on the other side, you learn that God is gracious, God is patient, and there's beauty in forgiveness because of the work that God is doing in our own hearts, right? Now, where you are now, how are you building upon your faith? How are you intentionally building upon your faith?
Yeah, I think I am being more intentional about it. I've always, as I said, there were periods where I would just sit down and read my Bible and be like, try to be super studious and all of that. But it wasn't, I don't want to say it was insincere. It wasn't coming from a genuine place, because I think it was in a way, but I was so young. I was really just trying to do what was right based on what my mother had told me. Now as an adult, I realized like I'm responsible for my salvation, for my relationship with God. If I choose to have one, I need to walk it out in a way that is intentional and sincere and genuine. So I try not to do too much because I can be a bit of a perfectionist and extremist. So I know, like, I in the past would tend to go all in, and I would just burn out and become like overwhelmed and just like fall away from it. So I'm kind of just taking the path of like less is more and slowly building upon it. So I read my Bible. I try to read it every day. I don't always read it every day, but I do try to read every night before I go to bed as much as I can. I pray every night. And when I first started reading my Bible again, I said that I was going to do it with just the intention of gaining understanding. Because I didn't say, okay, I'm a Christian again, I'm going to read my Bible. That's not how it happened. I got my Bible and I said, well, whatever happens on the other side of this, either I'm going to come across things or face challenges that I can't get past, and then I'll know like I have broken away from the faith, or I'm going to see the truth in it and come back to the faith. But I didn't pick it up with the intention of either or, like I'm going to prove it wrong. I'm going to prove that like I'm right to have moved away, or I'm going to prove that there is a God. I just said, I just want to understand. I just want to see. I just want to know what it's saying. I want to understand what it's saying. And so I say all that to say, like, I try not to put too much pressure on my faith journey in terms of like, you have to get everything right. You have to live your life according to everything and do it like flawlessly. I just know like, these are my intentions. I want to do things right. I want to learn. I want to understand. And that's just how I approach things. Like any time that I come across something that I don't understand or I have a question, I'll stop and I'll look it up. I started when I was younger. I didn't really watch like Bible scholars. I don't know anything about like Bible scholars, and I just started learning about like apologetics and all of that stuff. So I'm starting to consume more of those things to help further my understanding. So it's kind of things like that, just little by little building upon things. I do want to start getting into like doing devotionals and stuff that I used to do when I was younger, but again, just building like one day at a time, one thing at a time, and just seeing my faith grow that way instead of just like going super hard and then just overwhelming myself and becoming disillusioned again and burning out from it.
Okay. Are you going to a church now?
I do. I go to church pretty much every Sunday. I am still trying to find a home church. So I started going to a church a couple of years ago. That's like a, like young, fun, like hip church. Made it easy for me to get back into church. And now that I do enjoy it there. But now that I'm like growing more and more in my faith and really like learning more about scripture and like the context of scripture and just wanting to really have a deep understanding, I'm kind of looking for a church that will provide that. Like I do enjoy the church that I go to, but I do think that maybe I need to elevate, like graduate to something more just to help me get a deeper understanding.
Sometimes we do outgrow the teaching at a fellowship, and if we're not there to be a part of like the leadership team, sometimes it's best to go where we can now be fed more. I really believe in that. But I wanted to kind of speak to something that you were saying just before I asked you if you had a church home. I think devotions are like, let me just speak about it for me. Devotions have helped me like realize there's a need for Christ and his word to anchor my soul each day. I agree with you not putting pressure on yourself, because like you, I can be a bit of a perfectionist, right? And at the end of the day, what God wants is for our heart to be his. God is not measuring how much you know about the word, about how much I know. God is saying, just trust me with your heart. That's why when you said you begin to read and you weren't worried, you were like, whatever's on the other side of me starting to read my Bible, that's just what it's going to be. I think that's a great thing, because it's sincerely where you are, and it allows you to experience God for yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. And you don't read every day. I can just speak to devotions. What devotions have done for me, it helps center my day off bat. Like, okay, Lord, I'm gonna. There are three things I always pray about. I always pray about pride. I pray about lust, and I pray about anger. Those are three things I pray. And what those devotions do for me, it's almost like a gateway.
Yeah.
It's a gateway into like intimacy with God and trusting God with my day. And I tend to read less at night and just pray at night. You say you read at night.
I read at night.
Yeah. I would encourage you to try to find a rhythm with allowing God and His Word to enter the chat in the morning.
I have tried that, but the way my sleep is set
I get it.
I roll out of bed.
Okay.
And hop
Well,
on my
you're in a
computer.
rhythm. You're in a rhythm.
Yeah.
Because one thing I know about God, Kay, is He's able to take what we put, what we lay down at His feet and work it. You know what I'm saying? Jesus did multiply the fish and the bread. He's been multiplying disciples. God has been multiplying humanity through reproduction. God has the ability to multiply our efforts, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you pray and read at night. God can allow that to take over, you through the top of the morning to the afternoon. You see what I'm saying? Like, I know we can get at times a bit religious about things, become perfectionists and saying, like how I just share how devotions work for me. Oh, nah, that's how I believe sometimes churches get. No, you need to do it this way because I'm experiencing God this way.
Yeah.
And if you want to experience God, this is the reason. This is the way.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you're on this journey. You're having a personal relationship with God, but also a communal relationship with God, to where you have intimacy with Him at night in prayer and with the Word, but you're also going to church. I think that's very important. Do me a favor, maybe speak the best way you can to someone who may be in a dark space from betrayal, broken relationship, betrayal from church leadership. Like, kind of talk to them, like maybe someone who's wrestling with forgiveness. Like, give them a few words of how they can find hope in Jesus. Don't put too much pressure on yourselves, but just speak from your heart to people.
Yeah, I think it's important to know God and know, what God stands for and what God's intention is. Sometimes it can get a little cloudy when you start thinking of what everyone else says God is and what God wants for you. So I think first and foremost, it helps to know when bad things happen to you, bad things happen in life in general, it is not God inflicting those things on you. And always keep in mind that like everything is temporary. So whatever you're going through, it will pass. Take whatever lesson you can from it. I know when I was like in the depths of my depression, I hated to hear like, well, everything happens for a reason. Like, this is good that this is happening to you. And in the long term, like, yes, things do happen for a reason. I'm not with that person because I wasn't meant to be with that person. And I hate that, things had to happen the way that they did and it had to be so painful. But I think in going through that, it really helped me to learn a lot about myself, about the world, about how I show up in the world, how I handle conflict and handle relationships. So I think just know that whatever you're going through, God is not, tormenting you or inflicting this on you. And there's always something to be learned in that, and that it won't last forever. So just have hope that things will turn around.
Amazing. You heard it from Miss K herself. I appreciate you sharing, some of your story. I know it's not all of it, but it's some of it. You feeling safe enough to share that with with myself and There's Hope family. We're hoping that this will, push back against all the people that the devil are fighting. He's fighting our faith. The story of Job isn't just in the Bible just to be in there. It's in there because God knows that Satan is out to snatch our faith. Kay's story is proof of Satan, trying to snatch her faith, even as young as a teenager, him trying to bring confusion and deception and cause her to be disillusioned through what she experienced at one of the churches she was going to. That wasn't just by happenstance. That is Satan himself seeking to discourage and seeking to cause confusion and bring pain and anxiety and worry, because he knows our human condition is to go opposite of that. So if, like she said, you find yourself in that place, maybe it's something from the past, or maybe you're going through it right now, we want you to know that there's hope in Jesus. There's hope for your life. There's hope for your faith. There's hope for you, your family, your friends, all of it. And we're glad that you, took some time to listen to our story. And we also hope that you, take hope from this story as well. Listen, if you have something that you want to share, maybe a story about your faith, make sure you put it in the comment section so we can hear from you. Like this video. If this spoke to you, if Miss K gave you a word, you hear me? If she spoke a word of truth into your life, leave a comment. Let her know. But as I always say, no matter what has happened in the past, and no matter what you may be facing currently, always know, tell it. There's hope. All right, catch y'all in the next one.
Gonna fall down, but you gotta get up. I know the tide is raging.